This is the European edition of Breaking Banks,
the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
I am Matteo Rizzi.
I am Elizabeth Kleinfeld.
I am Don Ginsel.
And together we bring you the unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving financial services sector today.
A truly globalized show with some of the world's most well-known thought leaders and new voices in the fintech sector and beyond.
Join us every month as we explore what makes Europe a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing players in the world today.
Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. My name is still Matteo Rizzi. I am still the executive producer of the show, but today I am in a sort of unleveled here context because we have two hosts and a guest. I'm here with my friend and co-host Don Ginsel. Don, hey, how are you?
Yes, Matteo, very much ready for this new show and really spiced up because I think we're going to have a lot of fun together and looking forward to the talk and of course our fantastic guests. Bianca Lopes.
Hey, Bia. Welcome.
Sorry, Matteo.
Okay, guys. So, yeah, be prepared because this is going to be a bit of a, I want to say, unconventional, first of many, hopefully, where, hosts are going to outnumber the guest, hopefully. Let's see how it works. And, I want to, of course, we're going to talk about, what's latest in the fintech space, but also, a couple of events. Finally, I got to, Bianca brought me to Rio. That's also one of the stories we're going to share. But I want to start with something like personal experience attached to a great news. For the first time ever, a bank managed to get me $50 a month. I just pay the Revolut, whatever, ultra, platinum, whatever, because I discovered that, actually I didn't know, but I was spending already like triple that amount in, VPN, the Financial Times subscriptions and blah, blah. Now, I don't need Tinder anymore, but I also got Tinder Gold included in the in the Revolut. So now it's between I'm not being serious anymore or borderline, but truth is Revolut is kicking asses. Long story short, and they just announced that they're going to spend, what is it? The amount, Don? Couple of billion, 1? I can't even remember.
Yeah, something like that. I also don't have the right number in front of me, but it's indeed quite a big number that they're spending.
13 billion globally.
13 billion.
Very good.
And Don, tell the same sentence that you were saying over. I don't want to steal it from you. The marble.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting to see if money's being spent on corporate offices. I think that's something of old ages, and that's traditional bank used to do, right? So I think that's quite interesting now that if you see neobanks spending money on marble and beautiful offices, it's quite extraordinary. I think to see that jump maybe back in time. I don't know.
Yeah, in Brazil, you have probably the second largest, like a neobank. Is that the same vibe over there?
Not at all. Like Nubank is actually the lowest cost to service. They pride themselves on being like insanely cost efficient when you look at them hitting numbers over 120 million already users, having licenses like, they just came out with an OCC license that they're pursuing, which would bring them to the US. You're seeing, their leadership move to Miami. So you're seeing all these indications. And these guys, they service 120 to 150 million clients and entities with 4,200 employees, with almost 0 branches physically. I think that was the learning when you look at like where they came from. You had some consultants, you had some people that were in the big banks like Itaú before, which are really known for engineering, that were kicking ass and are still kicking ass now when you look at like what they're doing with APIs and securities. But one thing I would say, like, let's separate. I agree with you, Matteo. Like, Revolut is showing what open APIs and actual banking could look like and what services are. So, To me, I still think we have to ask a question around social license to operate and, what do we do with our money, or what do we do with our ability to buy marbles or collect marbles when we're thinking of banking or land grabbing. And when we think about, local communities with like struggling entrepreneurs and places you can like repurpose, I've been having conversations with regulators about that. What does it mean to bring a coffee shop to having a side of PCI compliance stuff? How do you really thrive economies if we're going to go back to, as you said, building bricks and building marbles?
I really like that idea as well. And what I think that they're doing really smartly is actually sort of capturing the financial experience people have rather than starting with financial products, right? So they just look at your financial problems instead of looking at the set of products that traditional players used to bring to the table.
And I wouldn't let's not talk about Matteo's problems or change and heart, app favoritisms that
Managing all those subscriptions.
are we, but what that is, like, I would go one step further and say, all right, now you're finally at least reading the data of the damn financial transaction that I was already doing in your ledger. Congratulations. Like, you've now looked at what I spend, and you've looked at, some mediums in the marketplace with like ClassPass, Financial Times, and great applications. And you said, how do I provide value to be able to justify a fee? But I still think we have yet to go to where the conversation gets really, really kick-ass and interesting, which is like, will you actually know what I need? And maybe are those the good apps? Or, who has the custody of that information? There's like a lot of other things that we can unpack later.
Yeah.
Before we get to the next news, I just want to say, first of all, that now, seriously speaking, I don't blame Revolut to invest in a big headquarter in London, because given their ambitions and the type of hire that they made recently, they struggled at the beginning because they were sort of they were accused, quote unquote, not to be equipped with the right type of talent and and white collar and banking experience they needed to expand. So you don't read anything like that about Revolut anymore. What you do read is about fast growth, super adaptability. Don, we were together in Forum Banca in this event in Milan a couple of days ago, and there were a couple of local digital banks. And they said, wow, it's very complicated to compete. Revolut just announced 4 million clients in Italy. They are the 5th largest bank in a country that they were nowhere 3 years ago. So and that is one example in a market that was certainly, not in their top, not in their top priority. So this, I think, is a lesson that a lot of digital, and in my humble opinion, the next battle is going to be the wealth one. So like the mass affluent under 50K assets, AI applied. There is also a little bit of it right now in the app. And by the way, the more you spend, the better rates you get. So it's sometimes you might even think they are too straightforward, but let's see what happens.
I think one of the interesting as well is that the traditional banks actually didn't see them as competition until recently. So because they actually said, like, they don't even have a banking license, so they're not the Revolut is not a bank, so we don't see them as competition, right? Which is a fallacy I see all the time, that people are looking at the wrong places for competition, because they don't have to look like you. They just steal all your business.
Actually, Don, talking about we involuntarily make a transition to what could be, the next topic to talk about. Talking about competition in places that, are not immediate to think about. Stablecoin. And actually, the stablecoin payments, remittances, multi-currencies, sort of stablecoin adaptability. There is in emerging markets, there is roughly a couple of startups per country that are all of a sudden coming to market, claiming they can do easily one African currency to another one over stablecoin, and solving the problem of money that can move or that can move super expensively. Why don't you share what just happened at Sibos when you and I were, so Bianca can comment? And we on purpose didn't, we didn't have the pleasure to have you with us there. We know you were busy on the other side of the ocean, but let's see what happened, Don.
No, true. So I think it was quite interesting. By the way, of course, the space is of course not very new, right? You could also argue that M-Pesa was already doing stablecoins in a way, or we at least have stable tokens, right? Even though they might run on different technology, the concept is very old. And I think especially in cases where people are uncertain about the value of local currencies or where there are export restrictions, for example, becomes really interesting to look at other ways of, transporting value. Well, from that perspective now, since the Genius Act popped up before the summer in the US, everybody's going crazy about stablecoins all of a sudden because, it looks like the Trump administration there made a really smart move by, on one hand, powering the stablecoin economy from a US perspective and letting it build on US Treasury, creating this enormous buying power. So quite an interesting feat. And you see, of course, that especially within Europe, there's a slight panic now because we don't want to be paying with US dollars in the future. And how do you actually maintain a certain value of the euro if they're not participating in a digital ecosystem, especially now with the options I think that stablecoins are beginning to offer. That said, I think still the massive use cases are still very much on ramp on, ramp off on crypto platforms. So right, that's where the most of the value of stablecoins is still being used for. So there's still some time, but then again, you'll see that the European Central Bank, who was also there at Sibos, is still very much dug into their position that the digital euro is going to solve it all. Well, that's not a very likely scenario, but then again, they have been working on this for so long. It wasn't expected that they would change their mind very suddenly. What is interesting, though, of course, is that we did see a consortium of banks under the regulation of the ECB that now together form a consortium to actually start issuing a euro stablecoin, besides all the other 1,000 initiatives to issue euro stablecoins that are running already in Europe. Apparently, they see the problem in the supply side, where I don't think actually the problem is. I think the problem is on the demand side, right? Who actually wants to use stablecoins? Okay, let's maybe philosophize a little bit about it because I think no one has a clue. Because there are plenty of use cases, but they're already running, or they've got things solved, or they just run on US dollar and don't have any need to change to euro based equipment.
Don, I am salivating for what Javier announced at Sibos. Go, come on.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'll let one part to you because that's your scoop.
Back, right?
Yeah. Okay. So Javier announced two things. Okay. One, and that was like a week before Sibos, a new scheme adding to the SWIFT standards to do C2C, so customer to customer payments over the SWIFT network. And he actually showed me on his phone. Listen, you will get the new scheme in a second. And he sent money from a European bank account to an Indian bank account at nearly zero cost, including the currency swap cost, and instantly. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, of course, you don't need pre-funding anymore. And of course, banks need to adhere, to this new scheme to do it. And of course, it does not solve the financial inclusion problem because if you don't have a bank account, but you only have a wallet, that is not yet interoperable. But it's certainly a step further in what I would call an absolutely amazing incremental innovation using assets that are already available. So that was the first one.
You guys were talking about data assets before this, and there was also an understanding, but there was a different license to operate. And as you have eloquently kind of brought up, Don, people didn't look for where your competitors should be able to. And when technology just says, hey, we could just do this, and it just works this way, and there's all these unhosted wallets doing this anyways, that's the only reason why these things have been running on stables. That's why there's companies that have trillions of dollars of volumes already. It's not because it happened yesterday. It's just the buzzword bingo takes a little time to catch on. All right, keep me going. This is the first one. And
And
is it live? How many banks are we talking? Because there's also protectionary opportunities, but there's an entire sort of standard of accounting that needs to get aligned.
well, let's say via that if Swift is as good as they usually are in terms of getting the communities together, a good critical mass could be reached soon. The second announcement that was actually the opening at Sibos is basically a digital asset layer on top of the Swift stack to do exactly what we were talking at the beginning. Stablecoin payments over the Swift network. There is not more, let's say, content to this yet, but of course, he made a huge buzz. Why? Because all of a sudden, it could be, the answer to what a lot of banks that are a little bit like lost, that they see their huge corporate clients all of a sudden, using alternative networks because they can't get their local currencies stuck, in some Latin America, South American countries stuck there, and want to repatriate, either US dollar or euros over Europe. And the only way to do it at the decent cost today is use stablecoins. So, that's the announcement that made the big buzz, with less details than the first one, because I think that now, of course, the call is getting a bunch of pilot. They will use consensus to actually run this first pilot. So time will tell, but certainly is, in my opinion, a way for Swift of saying, hey guys, we are not yet sort of out of the game, but time will tell.
Hmm.
That's a good conclusion.
That's it all.
Hmm.
And it's like, hello, can't hide my poker face. Not what I'm getting paid for. Oh. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Put it this way.
The sound says it all. Like, I've met incredible human beings there, and I'm continuously amazed about how their brain ideas and the commercialization of what comes out. There's like a mountain in between.
At the same time, someone has to put some standardization on it, simply because literally today there is almost, I don't want to exaggerate, but there is almost one startup or one player attacking each one of the large corporations that have this sort of issues, because when you think of it, they are moving between $500 million to $1 billion per year, and you get 1% of that business, or 0.5% of that business, which is, by the way, a huge advantage in terms of, today it costs 20 to 23%, through traditional standards. It costs potentially close to nothing, but let's say it costs 10 to 12%. So you can get an hefty business with one client in emerging markets, and you're happy go, but someone, unless they will start buying each other, and the strongest will survive, or someone comes and play their standard body, but okay, so that's let's see. I think that the news is
even on that space. Don't you think that even in that space, what you just said is so true? Like, somebody needs to play the standard body. Like, the reason why we met in Brazil, the reason why we talk about these things, like, we're trying to get people to talk to each other and realize that, like, there is one planet, one set of human use. You can all define yourselves however you want, but like, and this technology should just work.
Yeah.
So,
by the
It's
way,
critical key. Yeah,
yeah,
Swift is in a good position there, I think, to play that role. I think in general, they are in a good position to at least let the banks play a role in this ecosystem, which I think is their mission in general.
they have a responsibility to ensure that banks play a healthy role in
Yeah.
the opportunity, and they're like, come on, like, they've been the fiduciaries of value. We can call it whatever we want. We can put it in whatever ledger you'd like and label a couple more soup letter things that nobody will understand, just so we can keep some people out and feel important. But like, It's just
Yeah.
banking.
Guys, let's talk a little bit about big convenings and big messages. So as we said at the beginning, the Finance of Tomorrow happened last month. Bia and her team and co-founders are behind it. Bia, give us a little bit, like for the ones that this is a global show. Give us the 3 highlights from Finance of Tomorrow. The 4th one is that I got in love with Rio, and I eventually will retire there one day. And thank you for finally making me discover, that amazing city. But tell us a little bit what happened there, Bia.
Well, first of all, obrigado. I'm for the Portuguese learning ones. It's just taken me like a whole decade to get this man halfway across the world, and he flies very often. So it's like, it's really personal. Jokes aside, other than the reason for it being in Rio, being my city, the city I like to call home. A couple of years ago, actually a decade ago, started working with Matteo. We were working around Gates Foundation and between this like profit and nonprofit thing. And a conversation we often had was, why at the big events, whether the South Americans weren't just having a stage, whether they were uncomfortable with the language or they couldn't fly there because it was expensive, or people just didn't know about it because their news back in the time was localized. And, and we were sitting there being like, these innovations, these things from like Cairo to Africa to Rwanda to just and Finance of Tomorrow started many years ago in my head, but 5 years ago, I started talking to the central bank of my country in Brazil and explaining that they needed to explain to people what was happening. And I took an example of open banking as one of the legislations that, had originally started with FCA as CMA in the UK. But look at what we were really doing in Brazil. And like, if I give a shout out to my central bank now, last month they did over like 70 million API calls, bank to bank institutions a month. And like, in Canada and the United States, we're still debating if open banking or open data legislation is important. So the purpose of Finance of Tomorrow was to do 2 things, was to explain to people, to bring people together in South America, allow them to speak whatever language they were speaking. So they speak Spanish, they speak Portuguese, they speak French, they speak English, allowing them to be in their comfort zone effectively and allowing them to go into depth. So I wanted to create an event, having been in many events that were not about booths. So there's like no booths, there's no infomercial, there's no robots running around or bright screens. It was made for regulators. It was designed to bring regulators a chance to talk to each other, to understand that the legislation happening in one country might feel border in another country, but we all know that the world of digital has no borders. And some of these things impact, how money moves and then how economies can grow, which is their ultimate sort of responsibility. So Finance of Tomorrow was built on that. It's a 3-day regulatory conference, really a community. We get together in this beautiful city called Rio. So I get to steal all the regulators from their like traditional big cities into this gorgeous town to show them that there's more than carnival and beautiful beaches, but a place to think about what we value for tomorrow. So we talk about the environment, things like carbon or crypto, or things like data and AI, which is the next buzzword bingo that is bringing, data centers, infrastructures, huge opportunities for countries. When we look at, the Caribbean as an example, and Trinidad and energy as an example. So when we talk about these things, like how are these regulators understanding the type of licenses they're going to give and the type of industries that they're going to foster with this? So my highlights were that we had 17 countries. I am just amazed. It's the second year. We have a 5-year partnership with our central bank and the FCA. And my second highlight is that we had 63 students from 2 communities of Rio. So one of the things I really pride myself on is I'm bringing people from the community in Rio to have access to these big bankers and big regulators. One, because regulators don't get paid a lot of money. Some of them do in the United States, and some of them have made careers out of it. But our regulatory bodies in Latin America lack talent. So like Matteo knows, that's why Matteo is also there as a rebel and as a proponent with like time pledge of just giving time back, but it's, giving access to these people. So that's probably my second highlight. On the first year was really hard to convincing, ambassadors and regulators and like controllers and to say, yes, these kids are going to like hang around you all day and like, just get to see what is like. I said, the way I pitched it to somebody, I was like, how do you got to make your job like look attractive and like sexy and amazing. And like, I want to be a regulator. Like, I want to understand that this is the power or the responsibility I have in like a country or in like an entity. That's why all these guys get to buy their big marbles. Like, if the regulator said, can't work here, all the marbles go away. So like, this is what I'm trying to teach. So this is the highlight for sure. And last but not least is Matteo Rizzi, but he doesn't require, and this is the beginning of what we promised ourselves. Like, years ago in Africa, we said we were going to connect, like, Africa, South America, India, the things that we saw, the people that we met. And I know that this is just like the beginning of something. And I'm excited to be at Singapore Fintech Festival and connect these bridges. But yeah.
Guys, this is actually not the news, but Don, you should come next year. I mean, it's amazing how two Brazilian out of three are now using Pix. Like instant pay. Brazil came like in I don't know 5 to 10 years became the poster child of instant payments globally. In terms of adoption, and this is exactly what Gates Foundation is putting a lot of money into Africa to make it happen. Now, granted. We are talking about 54 countries versus 1. Okay, so there is the interoperability, challenge on the top. But yeah, I mean, it's again, it's not a news, but to me, it was a news to like discover an ecosystem that was. Actually, yeah, you didn't know, but we went to the Global SME Finance Forum. Which is another GFTN event as the Singapore FinTech Festival, you rightly mentioned. And I actually opened up my panel. I had to do some opening remarks with the Rio image. And that Rio image was this guy with just like literally, he had a swimming suit and flip-flops and a pack of candy, the Mentos candy box. He was selling on Ipanema. And but on the other hand, he had the payment terminal. So that was the first time ever, actually, that I saw sort of, it was very emblematic when someone that was really like at the bottom, of the sales cycle, that he managed, to get digitally enabled to sell a single simple product like candies. You should have seen it, Don.
Yeah. I think that's really cool, and I'm definitely keen to join if possible next time. So
Absolutely,
keep me posted.
Invitation extended. All right.
Great. So Bianca, I'm a bit curious as well. So more on the content side, right? So I think you see, I think regulators across the world are struggling with stablecoins, AI, cybersecurity risks, at the same time data protection, right? It's a big mess, right? So. How did you feel the atmosphere was? Did let's say, were there a lot of worries, or is there like a positive vibe also among regulators, whether they can deal with all this? I'm just curious about that.
Okay, so everybody knows me, honestly trained. There's 3 vibes. One, there's the vibe of like they really look forward to this. They're really there. They're meeting their peers. They're meeting their peers for 3 days. That never happens.
Mm-hmm.
They're spending the time. They have their own regulatory sessions where press and media doesn't go in, where they have their own time. So you see a lot of camaraderie, and you've seen legislation come out of it that indicates that they've been talking. And time tells, and because the legislation has moved very fast in Brazil and other countries in Latin America, because we have 17 in there that would this year, but there's like 40. So there's also a very divided South and many different regulatory bodies that even organize themselves differently. But there was a lot of tension in the air because during the period, so we host the events on September 8th, 9th, and 10th. So if you kind of just look back at the media, some of the largest hacks and picks and some of the people responsible for PIC security and the central bank were in my conference. And when they walked through I felt just the responsibility in my shoulder of I better be just sitting here creating a place for them to talk about these issues and not some make believe, because this person is holding the keys of like responsibility and fiscal of my country. And like I say that with like goosebumps and just the responsibility that we felt. And I remember there was tension in the room because, we found things around we all know this. Criminals are some of the smartest people on the planet. They use the best tools. They don't care about regulators. They don't need a license to operate. So, there was, of course, tension in the room because some of the biggest money movements are happening and some new platforms going live. And we joked around and said, "Oh God, we just got critical, and we now just need insurance for that. How fun!" But and it's a new level of cyber concern, one could say it. But a level of responsibility that these people are sitting there going, "All right, how do we have more tracks to talk about security, more tracks to talk about?" And in Brazil, I'll give you an interesting fact: like 250 million people, 50 million still like don't have really full access to what one would call digital. 20 million no access at all to nothing. And when you look at the 50 million that do have access to the about 100 million that are considered less educated and from C, D, and E classes of banking, yeah, Brazil has one of the largest mass affluence markets for sure. Matteo, I agree. But these other things, when that's what you fell in the air. You felt the responsibility of the regulator going like, I have stuff happening on social that is not my regulatory domain, but that's where money is moving. That there's a sense of reality that I feel like some jurisdictions in the world lack.
Big time, big time. Actually, I would like to report two short conversations that I had respectively in Brazil and then in Johannesburg for GISMAF. In Brazil, I believe it was someone from Peru that was actually central bank just bought software from UPI in India to actually implement instant payments in Peru. And that is, for me, an incredible witnessing on how this innovation is cross-pollinating, and I could not imagine how something like this could have happened 10 years ago. Imagine, from India to South America implementing the same technology for central banks, very particular, right? And then, in GISMAF, it was a deputy minister from innovation from Paraguay, and curiously enough, in Johannesburg, and they actually want to become, at the forefront. They want to be at the forefront of financial innovation technology. They're central banks, so all of a sudden they set up a sandbox. They inspired from Brazil to implement instant payments, and they are on their way to implementing it. And people understand that. Central bank understand their role finally. Before they were just as the police of financial services. Now they become the enablers, right? The true enablers, even at the technology level. So I find this probably one of the major shift or a new wave, of innovation that you could only see 4 or 5 years ago, since 4 or 5 years ago. And we have to sort of conclude talking about the Singapore Fintech Festival, which is happening in 4 weeks from now. Probably the biggest sort of convening. It is the biggest fintech convening, but also the biggest convening of regulators. Invited by the MIS, which is the correspondent of the central bank. And so dates are 10 to 14th of November. I'll be there. Bia, let's see how we can get more visibility and a bigger connection with Latin America. I hope we will succeed. Anything else, guys? Maybe one super short thing that you thought of and is worth to share before we wrap up.
Let me just give me one thing. This also where I was a bit curious about, but maybe we should catch up on that later. Bianca, is the sort of the because I do see that we're shifting towards financial well-being as a sort of a general focal point, not just for from the whole financial inclusion part, but actually I think for central banks as well, to get much more broader perspective on how people cope with their finances. I still think that we're actually seeing, especially, for example, neobanks, like we were starting the discussion with Revolut, actually taking a much broader approach beyond financial products to financial well-being. Right, and I think actually also your example with the guy in flip-flops being able to actually just being able to accept payments and be a merchant with the minimum investment in means possible. Right, I think that's actually what I'm really. I think I'm also into microfinance, and so let's say I think that these perspectives, where we go beyond, these people need a loan or they just need to be able to have a bank account. I think we need to look much broader, as in, is the financial system not standing in the way of possibilities for people to have a proper life, a proper income, deal with the risks that are facing them, which all have financial consequences one way or the other, right? So I think that's where I'm quite happy to see very gradually that we're expanding the scope of what finance actually is about, from an industry to actually on the user side, what's happening there.
For sure, the three of us are sharing this passion of not only the last mile, but for the financial things that are very inclusive, and we can all bring, a wealth of experiences because of the job that we have done, and most importantly, for where our passion is, for sure. Guys, it's time to wrap up. That was, amazing, intense as expected. Bia, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Matteo and Dan, and all the team at Breaking Banks 269, and lots to share. Excited to see your new formats and episodes.
The beauty is that Bia did it for me, so this is a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Banks Europe,
a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with timepledge.org.
Don't forget to shout us out on your favorite streaming platform, any social media channels, Medium, or YouTube at Breaking Banks Europe.
If there is something or someone you'd like to hear in our cast, let us know.
See you next month on Breaking Banks Europe.